So, Francesca, you make the point that in order to categorize what's happening as genocide, there are innumerable factors. Mass killing, extermination, or an act of extermination in and of itself doesn't necessarily constitute genocide. You write in the report that the destruction of Gaza has raised allegations of what you call domicide, herbicide, scholasticide, meticide, cultural genocide, and ecocide. And then you note nearly 40 million tons of debris, including unexploded ordnance and human remains, contaminate the ecosystem, over 140 waste sites, and 340,000 tons of waste, untreated wastewater, and sewage overflow contribute to the spread of diseases such as hepatitis A, respiratory infections, diarrhea, and skin diseases. As Israeli leaders promised, Gaza has been made unfit for human life. So all of these we're going to talk about in detail. You document what's happening in detail, but just talk about the complete eradication that raises what's happening to the Palestinians to the level of genocide.
Absolutely. In fact, what constitutes genocide is a specific number of criminal acts, like I mentioned, acts of killing members of the group when the group is identified as through four main criteria: ethnical, racial, national, or religious. And the group is targeted as such. This is the critical element. And then there are, as I was saying, acts of killing, infliction of severe bodily or mental harm, the creation of conditions of life that will lead to the destruction of the group. And then there are other two crimes that I'm not saying are not present in or have not occurred in Gaza. Simply have not had the elements to investigate that, although one regrettably so, the prevention of birth. I do think that this is an area that urges ad hoc investigation, because the way Israel has steadily, even before October 2023, targeted children is revealing of an animus or a mindset to target the Palestinians from the very, very early age. And this is demonstrated by the numbers of children arrested and detained, brutalized, tormented, tortured in some instances, although the threshold for torture for children is lower than for adults. And the killings, the extrajudicial killings of children hit in the head and torso. These are elements that have always been there, Chris. So how come we have not seen it? We have not seen what was happening, the trajectory we were describing before. But again, what is relevant in order to establish that there is genocide is not just the intent behind these crimes, enunciated at Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, is the overall intent, a specific intent to destroy the people, the group as a whole or in part as such. And what is the group here? Is the Palestinians as such, the Amalek, the monsters, the human animals. This derogatory language, this dehumanizing language has prepared the spirit of those who have ordered, planned, and executed the genocide. And it's not an easy task to establish genocidal intent, although, as I already wrote in my first report, it's impossible to deny it when it's so ostentatious, as in the evidence of it is so ostentatious, as in the case of Gaza. But there are three elements that I write about in the report. Even when the direct evidence of intent, like a plan on which Israeli leaders have written, yes, we want to genocide the Palestinians. Let this aside. I do believe that there is a direct intent, but let's assume that there is not. When direct intent is unavailable, then intent should be or must be drawn from inference, and only reasonable inference, says the jurisprudence. But we have to consider these elements, that while recognizing the possible composite nature of genocide, the fact that one war crime or one crime against humanity might also constitute an act of genocide, and this is pretty obvious. I mean, often genocides have happened in the context of civil strife, like it was in former Yugoslavia. But even the genocide of the Jewish people and Roma and Sinti, in a way, happened in the context of a war. However, the compartmentalization of the conduct into desperate acts without capturing the broader context is extremely dangerous. It's nonsensical. You cannot look for the genocidal intent with a magnifier. You need to take a step back and look at the overall, what I say, totality of the conduct, all the acts, the scale and nature of them, the knowledge of what these acts would have resulted into, in the totality of the territory against the totality of the people. And again, doing otherwise, and we can elaborate on that, but doing otherwise would vanify that clear obligation in the Genocide Convention to prevent genocide when the intent manifests itself. When the word Amalek was used, that was already a sign. It was not captured. But then, on the 26th of January, the International Court of Justice identified the plausibility of risk for the rights protected under the Genocide Convention for the Palestinian people, the plausibility that acts of genocide were being committed. So why Israel was not stopped then? And then, as of then, the acts have continued, have multiplied. And you know what, Chris? I ended my report only covers facts until September 2024. But just in the last 3-4 weeks, the crimes that have been committed against the Palestinians, the burning people alive, the bombing camps, refugee camps, and schools and UNRWA premises. This is and going home by home in northern Gaza, while the population is continuously exposed to the threat of starvation. What can it be? What can it be? So again, Israel continues to commit acts of genocide in Gaza, and the risk of this metastasizing to other parts of the occupied Palestinian territory is very real.
Well, you make that point, and you spend time talking about the conditions in the West Bank, which are, of course, becoming worse and worse. I was in the West Bank in July. You raised a very important point, that none of it is new. What's new is the scale. So in 2000, the cartoonist Joe Sacco, who wrote Palestine and Footnotes in Gaza, and I took my vacation time to do it from the New York Times, went to Han Yunis and wrote what we called a Gaza diary for Harper's Magazine, and just wrote day by day what life was like. The settlers were still there at Netzarim, and while we were in the camp, I speak Arabic, I heard through the loudspeakers, ta'al, ta'al, which means come, come, as the kids, the young boys, 10, 11, 12, were coming out of school, on their way home from school. And then they began, the Israelis began, through the loudspeakers on their Jeeps, using curse words, Ibn Sharbuta, and these horrible terms. The kids naturally picked up rocks and they shot them. They were like, mice enticed into a trap. That article, and we had their names, the times they were shot, I mean, it was incontrovertible, led to my being told by the newspaper that I would no longer cover the Middle East. I would no longer be allowed to report out of the Middle East. So what we're talking about is scale, and I think you capture that in the intent has always been there, but the scale is unlike anything we have seen. I think you even argue greater than the Nakba. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second point, when you talk about dehumanization and Amalek, that's what I saw in Bosnia, where the Serbs referred to all the Bosniaks as Ustasha, And to be fair, a lot of the Bosniaks referred to the Serbs as Chetniks. These are World War II terms when the Ustasha were allied with the Nazis, and the Chetniks were Serbian nationalists who were fighting the Ustasha, separate from Tito's partisans. So I want to ask you about that because essentially these historical terms are used, and of course the Israelis have referred to, as is also in your report, referred to the Palestinians as Nazis, but they historicize this, and I just want to ask you about that. That was true in Bosnia, and that's true in the apartheid state of Israel.
Yeah, look, just for the sake of clarity regarding intent, and sorry to be the picky lawyer, but what I do say that has always been there is the potential to commit genocide, because the Greater Israel plan that has always been there, making the whole land of Palestine a land for the Jewish people only, had an eliminatory component for the Palestinians. Because as I write in the report, and I think this will resonate very strongly with all indigenous people, for the indigenous people, the land is not the place where they live, is who they are. It's part of the identity, and this continuous uprooting of the Palestinians en masse in big events in 1947-49, in 1967, and now as of 2023. These are instances where Israel seizes the opportunity to forcibly displace the Palestinians using very destructive means, but never the violence has been so acute and, in a way, intentionally, deliberately eliminatory, as in this case. So it's like the genocidal intent has been dormant in the veins of the system. But then the opportunity, the capacity, the circumstances that developed after October 7 have been such to prompt this genocide. And, while there have been these massive instances of forced displacement, forced displacement is not per se genocide, but again, it might be part of a genocidal conduct. Palestinians have been uprooted all the time, even individuals after individuals, family after family, and Israel has tried to take as much land as possible, inch by inch, home by home, dunum by dunum. And again, this is why in the report I describe that in this case, genocide is a means to an end. The end is the realization of Greater Israel. They openly talk about removing the Palestinians from Palestine. They can go to Jordan, they can go to Egypt. There are over 20 Muslim countries. This is so racist. How can we even entertain such an argument without really stopping it and blaming those who use it, accusing those who use it of racism? But so, it has always been there, and things have escalated. At the time, Israel found that, they were ready, but then they did it Israeli. I think it's been quite deliberate, certainly in Netanyahu's mindset, and the way they have presented and projected the Palestinians throughout the whole history of Israel. Nurit Peled, whom I often quote, talks of the quote-unquote Nazification of the Palestinians. So yes, there is this dehistoricization of the Holocaust. The Palestinians are blamed for the Holocaust. They are called Nazis, but also look at the language that Israeli leaders, military, political, and religious leaders have used after October 7. We are fighting for civilization, for Western civilization against the barbarians. We are the light. We are the people of light, and these are the people of darkness. This language is not new. This has been used over and over in other settler colonial contexts and genocide in order to justify the crimes, the counterinsurgency, the countering terrorism, or the self-defense against these monsters. So this is the reality, how I see it.